Hey everybody, welcome back to Dad Talk Today. I am your host Eric Carroll, joined by my man, Mr. Jeff Morgan. And tonight we've got Kash Jackson and Ted Bush on the podcast. How you doing tonight, fellas?
Excellent.
Kash, glad to see you, my man. I know you came on last time. We was having a little bit of technical difficulties, but give everybody a little brief explanation again of who you are and some of the things that you've been facing.
So I'm Kash Jackson. I'm a retired Navy veteran, previous gubernatorial candidate for the state of Illinois in 2018 for the Libertarian Party. And currently I'm a volunteer for the Fathers' Rights Movement, and I'm part of their public advocacy field there. And so I try and help to bring attention and awareness to the plight of fathers in this nation. And I'm also a father involved in my own case, fighting corruption directly in the state of Illinois and calling it out, being transparent about it, and being very, very aggressive in how I'm approaching that.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. How about you, Ted? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, my man.
Well, I spent about 15 years in the Washington, D.C. swamp. I worked for a member of Congress and did some other advocacy. And then I moved to Chicago and saw the family court system. And then I found out what the swamp really looks like. It's worse out here than it is out there. I followed a little bit of Kash's campaign. I voted for him. And the more I learned about his case, the more I wanted to help him. The more I learned about how much he did for all of us. And to see what was happening to him, to learn more and more, I just couldn't believe it. So I called him up one day. I offered to take his case. And one thing led to another. And, if you know Kash, now we're pursuing a petition in Lake County, which we'll talk about, involving constitutional right to record court proceedings.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. We're living in unprecedented times right now, and what's going on in the courtroom is crazy. We've been seeing the Zoom calls going out and the recordings. Can we talk a little bit? I know Jeff, he's been involved with this a little bit down there in Texas as well. So how do you guys feel about the Zoom calls being used for the court cases?
This is a tough one. I don't know if Ted should lead with this or if I should lead with it. I guess I'll be kind of short and sweet about my end, and I'll let Ted get a little bit more into the technicalities of what we're discussing. I ran on a campaign in 2018 of transparency and accountability for government, primarily inside our courthouses. In many courthouses in Illinois, as well as across this country, there is no transparency. They make you get a court reporter when, in fact, in many of these hearings, these status calls, they're violating due process rights when no one would ever think that they're going to need a court reporter or a recording. And I saw this playing out time and time and time again. And then here we go with the COVID crisis, and it takes this COVID crisis to get them to institute Zoom hearings. And why did it take so long to do that? They had these Zoom hearings going within a couple of months. Why weren't they doing that from the very beginning? I'll tell you why. Because they don't want any transparency. They don't want anybody to be seeing the crimes that they're committing against the general public, because if they did, they would be outraged. The general public are ignorant as to what's transpiring right in their local county courthouse.
Absolutely. I'm going to pass it over there to you, Ted.
Well, I would just follow up on that. So what happened in Kash's case is there was a recording from a March 12th, 2020 appearance in which Kash was actually thrown in jail for civil contempt. He was wrongly booked. They originally charged him for criminal contempt, but this was recorded by two bystanders. And all he wanted to do was to get a protective order before he disclosed his home address in Arkansas. The judge wouldn't listen to him, throws him in jail. I had to get him out. And then a few weeks later, we did a Facebook chat about this that got about 25,000 views. Kash is widely followed. And the judge found out about this, that a prior proceeding was recorded. So we had a hearing scheduled on June 23rd via Zoom. And then the judge, sua sponte, which means by her own motion, enters an order making a specific exception for Kash, that our hearing on the 23rd is going to be in court. We have to go into court, surrender all our phones and recording devices, and have our hearing, when otherwise he would be able to participate from Arkansas, just like we are now, via remote hearing. And he would be able to not only record that and distribute it and comment about it. Now, what we have scheduled on June 23rd is actually very significant because there was just just last month in the Michigan Supreme Court, there was a ruling that said that states have to follow federal law when it comes to remunerating child support from veterans. And so we're going to be having a hearing on this in the circuit court level where we're raising the issue that his military disability has been wrongly remunerated for child support illegally going on 3 or 4 years, and he's owed a substantial refund of $30,000. So this affects all veterans, certainly all veterans in Illinois, but also others. So that's a matter of public importance, another issue of federal law. And because of Kash's advocacy, and frankly, I guess they're afraid of him, we're not going to be able to advocate for that. The public's not going to see a district judge, a circuit court judge, being confronted with the supremacy clause, which is one of many federal doctrines that the local courts never want to follow. Due process, supremacy, federal principles, they just go out the door when we go into state courts. And I think it's something that, unfortunately, the entire veteran community and the father's rights community is going to miss. Because, would Kash for sure distribute this? Maybe, but the fact is that he's losing that right. And he has a right, which I can discuss, there's a couple of cases, to make a recording and to disseminate a recording of any public official doing public business, making statements that are an audible range. Everyone who's been in court knows that there's no expectation of privacy in a courthouse. And there's certainly no expectation of privacy of a Zoom call, which is a broadcast by the court itself.
Hey, Eric, you mind if I chime in for a moment here?
I was about to pass it to you, my man. I know you're very passionate about this subject as well.
We've had some of these cases down in Texas, and when they first started talking about Zoom cases, I was really a little bit upset about it because I thought, yes, the courts must go on. Everything else is shut down, but the courts must continue on. And then I started to think about that, and I thought, this is actually a good thing because the judges have a sense of superiority and arrogance, and the attorneys do as well. And all we have to do is sit back and watch and gather the evidence. And that actually has been happening down here in Texas. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Shelley Luther case, but Shelley Luther was the lady from Salon a la Mode who decided that she wanted to open up her shop in defiance of an order that she was not able to do so. Well, that was broadcast online. And what was and I have, actually I got the broadcast and then I edited a little bit of it, just, small segment, sent it to the judge, and probably within about 2 hours or so, the broadcast was taken down. But at that point, I had the whole thing and I stuck it on my YouTube channel. But the interesting thing was this: you could see people start to say, "Did you see him roll his eyes?" They talked about a lot of the nonverbal communication that we know takes place in the courtroom, but that is never captured on a transcript. And if we're using the transcript on the basis for our appeal, a lot of the communication is missing. But in addition to that, the court reporter kept on saying, "I'm sorry, I'm not getting this. You're speaking too fast." So the court reporter who's making a transcript of the record doesn't have it right. Does not have it right. And she's telling the judge that, and the judge can't hear. It was crazy. But people are just shocked. But the thing is, there's nothing shocking to us who have been there. And to go along with that, there have been a few times in court that a friend or somebody like that I may know of has also either made audio or video recordings and put them out. And the judges get very upset when some of what goes on in their courtroom gets publicized. But why is that? Why do we have star chambers today in America? This is completely unjust.
We have to really, as people, go, wait a second. It's a public courtroom. It's a public hearing. Right. Anybody can walk in and sit there, okay, and listen as this unfolds and transpires. So why are judges working so hard to keep it a freaking secret? I mean, the general public should go, wait a second. If a cop doesn't want to wear a body cam, that's got to tell you something. Like your spidey sense should go off that something's not quite right.
Absolutely. And let me take that a little bit further, because one of the courts that I went into, after they found out that I had that somebody that I know of or whatever had a recording, the next time I went into the case, they to the courtroom there, they put up a special sign that said, no audio, video, cameras, everything else. I called it the Jeff Morgan rule, because they put it up that day to make sure that somehow I could not get a recording of the whole thing. And so instead I have the transcript. But I mean, what is going on in these courts that they are that corrupt, that they have to be that secretive, that they cannot allow themselves the exposure so that we can see? Let them be transparent. They want us to be honest. Let them be honest. And as you mentioned in this petition, Ted, a little bit of sunlight does a lot to help disinfect the germs and so on that are in the courtroom today.
Well, if it wasn't for the recording of what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, we wouldn't have the reaction that we had. And like you said, a transcript is not the best reflection of what we said and how we said it.
Right.
And does anyone honestly think that a transcription of what happened to George Floyd would be an adequate substitute? It's not.
Yeah, I would love to read that transcript. Officer Numbnuts has his knee on suspect's neck for 9 minutes. I would love to read that transcript, how they describe that particular incident.
Well, the thing is, obviously, we all know that there's no fundamental right to privacy in a domestic relations courtroom. I think that there would be a legitimate exception when there's children involved. Obviously, a child is not able to consent. I don't think that children under the age of 18 should get broadcast under any circumstances. But the thing is that the children don't even go into court anyway. So
right.
The judges do everything they possibly can not to talk to the people whose rights they're adjudicating.
Right,
okay?
right.
So that's really not an issue. But what happened to Kash is a perfect example of there not being a fundamental right to privacy. Kash ran for governor on fathers' rights. It ran a great campaign. Like, as someone who was in Washington for 10 years, did public advocacy myself, he ran one hell of a campaign on fathers' rights. He got all over the media. And so he was a legitimate contender, a Libertarian Party candidate nominee. The only other major party candidate that gets on besides Republican and Democrat. So what happened is the former governor, Bruce Rauner, billionaire, his campaign went through the public record in Kash's case and did an opposition research dump based upon all the nonsense that was filed in, did an opposition research dump to the media, which ultimately resulted in stories being published about Kash's personal life and the proceedings, and even a spot on Comedy Central. And so it's okay for us, but it's not okay for them.
Right.
They're asserting a right to privacy that doesn't exist.
Right.